Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event today. I think by now you're all familiar with how we do our virtual events, and I think this one is our 120th, or we've done over 120th webinars since the beginning of the lockdown in March. We are very excited for today's partnership with Macquarie Business School and, of course, Austrade. This 30-minute session is a teaser for a 6-hour course called Negotiation and Conflict Resolution, which will be offered to you in February 2021. This is one of the most popular electives at the Macquarie Graduate School of Management, so mark your calendars and register early to secure your slot. The full course that you may take in February, just like what I said, will further the opportunities of our member companies to strengthen their employee talent and acquire new skills under the ANZCHAM's Advanced Learning Academy portfolio. We are very proud that we have grown this training portfolio by almost 40% this year and introduced unique and global training programs to our member companies. We will share more details about the offering toward the end of the program, so stay tuned. We have an early bird rate for our members, so I hope you take advantage of that opportunity. For now, let me introduce to you our facilitator today, Dr. Andrew Hayes. He's an educator and consultant with diverse experience across Australia, Asia, and India. Andrew specializes in management and executive education with focus on negotiation and business communication, managing people, and leadership. He balances his time between his academic responsibilities at the Macquarie Graduate School as a lecturer in management and delivering executive education programs for the school. Andrew is well known in Australia for running the Negotiation Theory and Practice course. This course has also attracted over 6,000 students in open universities in Australia. Andrew is valued by his students and clients for the engaging and applied approach he brings to his classes and seminars, and the depth of his approach based on his worldwide experience as a consultant. In 2013, Andrew was awarded the Dean's Award for Outstanding Teaching. So everyone, let's give a warm hello to Andrew. Mabuhay, Andrew, and welcome to the ANZCHAM community. I'm sure everyone is excited to listen to your presentation today.
Thank you, Marika. Thank you for that very kind introduction. And it's a really great pleasure to be here with you and with your members today. Hi, everyone. As Marika has introduced me, I won't spend any further time introducing myself, but rather let's just get straight into business for today. My topic today is get control of your negotiations. And as Marika mentioned, today is just a teaser session. So it's just a short, sharp knowledge burst for you on this morning, just to give you some ideas about how you might just exert a little bit more control around your negotiation. So I normally spend a huge amount of time really focusing on, some of the theories and some of the empirical research to do with negotiation. I'm not going to touch any of that territory today. I want to be really, really practical and really just give you some advice that you can immediately put into practice. And really, I do try to make sure that all of my material and all of my workshops are very applied and very applicable and stuff that you can immediately put into practice. So let's get going. I want to start with a story, and it's a common mistake, I think, that people make in negotiation. So, day one of an MBA course, a 5-day course, and the participants are asked on the first morning of a negotiation course to immediately go into action. So I put them into a couple of seminar rooms and give them some briefing notes and ask them to plan and then run a moderately complex negotiation. So the teams plan their strategy for about an hour, and then they move to another room and they meet with the other group, and they're asked to get straight to work, straight down to business. Some teams are very successful and they're able to use their innate skill, their existing knowledge, if you like, to navigate and negotiate an agreement. But a lot of the groups actually go off track remarkably quickly. They find themselves in a deadlock. They don't work well as a team. They might have misunderstandings. They might have different misaligned expectations, and they very quickly break down. And usually the problems that arise are not rational, fundamental differences or deadlocks in the content of the agreement of what they're trying to argue. It's perfectly reasonable proposition that's being put to both sides, but often I scratch my head when I watch this and I say, how did you go so far off track so quickly? And remember, this is day one, so I haven't given them any training yet. What do you suppose are the main problems? If they're not content related, what are the main problems? Well, you guessed it. They're process problems. They're to do with how the groups negotiate, not what they're negotiating. So the root cause of the problems are often communication, a lack of teamwork, a lack of process management. And this observation is verified when I do the debrief and I ask the students, okay, you were given an hour to plan. How much of that hour did you plan on the process, how you were going to negotiate, how you were going to open, how you were going to move through the agenda, what roles each person was going to play? And they usually say 5 minutes tops out of that hour they spent on process. And I go, you've just learnt your first lesson about negotiation. It's not all about content. Content's really important, but it's not the only part of the equation. So negotiation is often about creating value. And we hear this phrase talked about a lot. People often use the term win-win negotiation, where both parties are walking away from the table having got something, some measure of value that's been derived from the interaction. And I'm sure many of you people do this on a daily basis where you're trying to create some kind of customer satisfaction or client satisfaction or suppliers or employees or funding bodies or boards of directors, whoever you might be negotiating with, you're trying to create value out of the exchange for both parties. And this is embodied in creativity, in collaboration, in finding compromises, in finding a fair agreement that everybody can live with, and in finding options that we can manufacture and that we can massage together so that we come up with something that's going to work for us both. So we usually call these types of activities creating value. But the thing that's often also forgotten is once you create all of that value, you also need to claim value. And claiming value is very tempting to go from this nice, creative, collaborative process to a tug of war. And we don't want to do that. We don't want to very quickly switch hats and go from being collaborative to being very competitive. So we want to find a way to claim the value that's being created in a way that's consistent with this collaborative, creating value mindset that we're trying to establish. So here we divide the pie, whether it's equally or unequally, depending on some equation. We might need to assert our rights in a negotiation. We often try to use some objective criteria or a precedent or a standard or even a law or a company policy that we might invoke to be able to kind of to divide the pie, so to speak. We might use transparent standards that we're trying, might be an industry norm that we use to be able to help us to divide the pie. And we also want to work together to determine what we call the distribution equation. How are we going to distribute profits or value from an agreement? So we've got these two things that work in tension. You've got creating value, which is also call it expanding the pie. And then you've got claiming value, which is also called dividing the pie. And we have to try to find a way to make those two processes work well together. And often a key part of that is establishing a perception that we're being fair, both in the process and the outcome. And if we get that right, we get the process out right and we get the outcome right, then usually it tends to nourish or nurture our relationship. And so we've got two pieces here. We've got outcomes, and people see those fair if they feel as though they've got the value they initially expected or that they felt they deserved from the discussion. And we've also got fairness in process. And this is usually seen as fair if negotiators feel that they were appropriately involved in decisions that affect them or in an agreement, and that steps have been taken to distribute the value fairly. So fairness is really a key kind of source of perceived value in negotiation. A sense that a negotiation's fair comes from our perceptions about outcomes and process. And sometimes people will accept an outcome that wasn't perfect if they feel as though the process was fair. So you've got three key things here that we're trying to sort of manage. We've got process, outcome, and relationship. And those three things are sometimes called the three negotiations. What do we mean by the three negotiations? Aren't we complicating things here? Well, no, I don't think we are. I think this is really important that we remember within everything that we call negotiation, there's actually three subsets of a successful negotiation. There's relationship on the left of the screen here, there's content, and there's process. And out of the relationship, we want to create trust. Out of the content, we want to create value. And out of the process, we want to be perceived to be fair. And so we work on these three negotiations. We might negotiate our relationship. If I say to you, we want to have a preferred supplier agreement, we want to have a longer term prospects for our relationship, we want to work as partners. I'm talking about relationship here. I'm negotiating our future relationship. If I say, I don't want to talk about that item on today's agenda because it's too early and we haven't established enough of the groundwork before we get to that key point. If in that phrase, I'm negotiating process. So we do negotiate those three elements. And if we get those three elements right, if we negotiate those three elements skillfully, then we create value in the final agreement. So I want to work on my process negotiation. I want to work on my relationship negotiation. And if those two things are seen as being fair and equitable, then trust is part of the outcome. Trust is the dividend. Our relationship is enhanced and people want to do business with us in the future. And that's what I call, or what we call the three win-win negotiations. How do we measure a negotiation? Many years ago, two guys called Fisher and Urey out of the Harvard Negotiation Project articulated what they call 7 elements in negotiation. And these are the 7 elements in maroon on the screen here: relationship, communication, interests, options, legitimacy, commitments, and alternatives. And I often say to my students at the end of a negotiation, let's run a balanced scorecard over the agreement that you've just struck. Let's look at these 7 elements and measure what we've just done against these criteria. So firstly, we look at relationship. So you've just done a negotiation. Ask yourself, did the negotiation preserve or enhance the relationship? Do people want to do business with us again, effectively? Or have we been so difficult to deal with, or have we driven such a hard bargain, these people basically never want to see us again? And I suggest you don't really want to be in that position. The second piece is communication. Did we communicate clearly? Was the negotiation built on effective and clear communication? Do we know what we've agreed to, for example, or are there unclear clauses or agreements that are ambiguous? We really don't want that. Does it meet our interests? Did the negotiation meet our interests? So the drivers behind any positions that we might have taken, the broader suite of concerns that we've got. The fourth is options. Were multiple options considered before we reached the final agreement? So did we think about a number of different creative ways that we could move forward? And did we kind of massage those and work together to try to create something that was going to work for both of us? And fifth, we've got legitimacy. Were the arguments made based on the basis of agreed and accepted principle or facts that we both agree to? So do we see it as being an agreement that's legitimate, that meets the test of time, that we can subsequently go and maybe talk to our boss about it and he or she will say, yeah, that sounds fair enough, that sounds reasonable. The second to last one here is commitments. And did we make clear and unambiguous, measurable, clear commitments that we know what we've agreed to and that we can walk away with? And that's a really important process step as well. And finally, alternatives. You may have heard the term BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This is where we think about our alternatives. Did the parties take into account alternatives and use those options as benchmarks to measure the emerging agreement? Is what we're negotiating better than what we can do by ourselves, for example? So when you evaluate a negotiation, here's a nice, neat way of evaluating it more holistically. Okay, let's turn to process, our main game for today. I want to talk a little bit about 3 key moments where we can manage process. And often the success or failure of a negotiation hinges on key moments, or what we call critical incidents. Moments where the negotiation, got better, where we made a breakthrough, or where it got worse, where there was a crucial misunderstanding and the parties got agitated or angry, or they decided that they wanted to walk away. And here are 3 key moments which I think process really influences: opening moves, discovering value, and also blocking or redirecting moves in a negotiation. Let's talk about framing, the first few minutes, the first 5 minutes of our negotiation. So when we frame or we set up a context for our conversation, we're setting ground rules, we're setting an agenda, we're talking about the context, maybe managing the elephant in the room, something that hasn't been discussed, we're getting that on the table. Maybe we're establishing roles, managing expectations. We're doing all of those things. We're trying to be very persuasive in the opening moments. We're not just simply saying, hi, good morning, what are we here to talk about? Let's get going. You're using that opportunity to influence the process. So I've just given you a kind of fictional example here of 2 people negotiating, and how would we possibly start this negotiation off in a way that's going to subsequently influence the course of the negotiation? Here's a couple of things we can do. So on the top left of the screen, the person sits down, we take care of the niceties, and then we go straight into it, and the person says, okay, thank you for taking the time to discuss the outstanding issues today. It's really great that we're able to meet so we can try and finalise our agreement. Okay, we're trying to start with a kind of a strong positive sentiment and manage and set some expectations. But we also want to talk about something that may have happened, or the context. So the person says, just before we begin, I wanted to just share some brief points about the context of today's discussion that I think are relevant, because a few things have changed since we last met. So just so we're all on the same page, let's just go through a few key things. Would that be okay with you? And I'm using a little bit of a permission statement there, making sure that my partner's okay with that proposition. Then I move to the right of the screen, and here's where we sort of set up the expectation. So I say something like, so the outstanding issues that we identified in the emails the last few days are timing, the allocation of costs, and the intellectual property rights. Is that a fair summary? Also, there's some new thinking from our side on some of these issues that I'd really like to share with you today. So it's a bit of a hook there for the person. And based on these, I'm really confident that we can work through the key issues and possibly even get to a heads of agreement, a statement of intent. Then bottom left, we're managing expectations or objections. So let's say I've brought someone along. I might say, I've given some consideration to how we handle some of the sticking points from our last few meetings. And as we found out, there's some technical elements to the discussion that can be hard to understand. And that can be frustrating. So I've asked our IT manager to join and help us simplify some of the key points. I trust that's okay. And then in the final frame, I say, may I suggest a basic structure for today's meeting and perhaps a few suggestions for how we might proceed if we get stuck. I really want us to focus on our agenda and think as creatively about how we can solve our differences. Can I suggest we start in the following way? So this is much, much more than simply saying, good morning, here's the agenda, bang, let's get going. I'm trying to set up some expectations, and I'm really trying to guide the process here. So that's our first key moment, our first impressions and our opening. The second key moment that's really important where we manage process is I don't want to just go and start pitching an idea to you, and I don't want you to feel as though I'm not interested in what's important to you. So let's say you've said, look, we can't do this, and I want to talk to you about why we can't do it. I want to get to the bottom of what your concerns are. So I ask what we call interest-based questions. So starting up on the right-hand side of the screen, if I'm trying to understand my counterpart's interests, I want to ask them what those interests are. So what I often try to do here is ask what we call why questions. Why do you want to do it that way? Why is that structure valuable to you? Why is what we've proposed not acceptable? Often we ask these questions using a more curious tone rather than what we would call an accusatory tone. So I don't want to put you on the back foot. I want to be a little bit disarming here and say, can you tell me why that's a concern? Use as neutral a tone of voice here. And then listen actively. We all know what that is, but we might want to sort of use the person's name here, or possibly even use the pronoun you. So you're saying that you're concerned about X, Y, Z, and you told me that this is a problem. Can you elaborate on that? So then I'll use some probing questions. So probing is, can you tell me more? I didn't understand that previous point. I'm really showing my interest here and a real motivating to get to the bottom of what's concerning the person. Then I might use some more interest-based questions. Okay, what else is important to you? What are your priorities? And then close the loop by really guiding the process and closing off with the person. So if I ask a sequence of questions, I want to show the person that that's been helpful and show my gratitude. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. That's really valuable. That really allows me to better tailor my suggestions or the options as we move forward. So process is really important here. I'm not just asking a few questions, I'm leading the person toward what we call value discovery. And the third key moment is about being in control of the process, guiding and leading the process. I talk about the idea of being in control, not being controlling. There's a big difference. Controlling is when we're too dominating or too overpowering or overbearing in a conversation. And often a personal backlash or push back against that. So remember, I'm talking about being in control, not being controlling. So we want to check, for example, that our suggestions are okay with our counterpart. So an example of where we might want to push back or redirect is, let's say somebody asks us for a best price. Let's say we're in a price negotiation and I don't want to give that price just yet. So I want to sort of redirect or control the process. Maybe I don't know exactly what the about what the proposition's going to be or what the volume's going to be or the future potential. So I don't want to give that best price risk. How do I redirect that? When I redirect a process move, I want to start by acknowledging their process option, then suggest an alternative process option, but back that up with some legitimacy, and then say that how that satisfies a process interest. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So let's say I say, I'm glad to give you a price now, which is what they've just asked for. That's their option. But since I do not fully understand what you want, so I'm legitimizing why I'm not going to do that, I will not be able to give you my best price. For me to be able to do that as fast as possible, which is their interest, I just need to ask you a few questions first, which is proposing a new option. Is that okay with you? So I don't just say, look, I can't give you a price now. I need to ask more questions. I give them a really good explanation for why I'm blocking or redirecting that question. So I'm transparent. I'm showing them a reason why I don't want to answer that question. I hope that makes sense and gives you some ideas. And another point is, often we get not ambushed, but snuck up on sometimes at work. And sometimes there's a good case for us to want to sort of say, look, I don't have my mind in that issue at the moment. Can I come back to you a little later in the day when I'm resourceful, when I've reviewed my notes, and try to negotiate when I'm ready and when I'm resourceful? That too is an example of controlling process. Guys, that's all I've got for you today. We've got time for some Q&A, but I want to leave you with one last thought here, and that is that negotiation is a learned skill, and you can only learn this skill by practicing it. So to learn it, you have to do it. So I really encourage you to look for opportunities to negotiate and try to practice with intent. Try to think about what you're trying to work on to improve your overall skill set. Thanks everyone for your kind attention and for coming along today. And I'll just pass back to you, Suzanne.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So one of the questions is, if a deal is going south, how do I save it with process?
Yeah, look, it's really important that you remember that process is always an option. It might feel as though there's a deadlock issue and you can't see a rational way forward. Often process can make a difference. What do I mean by process? Maybe you slow things down. Maybe you need a mediator. Maybe you negotiate between more senior people in the organization. Maybe you have somebody bring some new facts to the table. If whatever you're doing is not working, don't keep doing that. Find a different way of negotiating the process. And often leverage can be found with process. You might find yourself in a negotiation where you don't feel you have much leverage or power, for want of a better word. Sometimes changing the game from a process point of view can help to add a little bit of that leverage.
Thanks very much, Andrew. So who should open a negotiation? I mean, is there an advantage to being the one that makes the opening statement?
I think there is definitely an advantage. You set the scene, you set the tone. You can also do a lot of what that framing that I was talking about, where you set up a particular context, or in communication, we call it priming the listener. So you're getting them ready for a message that you want to deliver by giving them some facts that they need to keep in mind as you deliver your message. But typically it's the most senior person usually assumes the right to open, or the person who's hosting the meeting or has called the meeting. But I often think it's a good idea just to keep an opening in your head, even if you're not sure who's going to be opening up.
Thanks very much. So we've got a great question here. How would you counter negotiate when the main issue is price? So selling a premium product or the budget of the client is an issue. That's a question from Alexis.
It's a really important issue, particularly if you're selling a product that's not the cheapest in the market, or a product that you're trying, or a service that you're trying to prevent from being what we call commoditized. So you're trying to make sure that the product is seen as premium or has value. So it's really important that in that negotiation, you try to negotiate more on value rather than on price, because that's a disadvantage to you. So you also have to look at the total. I think it's important to use phrases like the total cost rather than looking at, just the upfront cost. So in technology, you might call the total cost of ownership, or the risks associated with a product that's less premium or less established in the market.
Okay. Great question from Peter here. Is there one best negotiation technique that never fails? If yes, what is it? I'd love to know myself.
Peter, I'm not a cookie cutter sort of guy. I think it's very much horses for courses. But the one thing that out of today's, I think that will help you is to think about those 3 negotiations. And that's often a little bit of a revelation for people to think about, hey, it's not just all content. It's not about just having the best business case. Often it's about having the best process and also trying to manage the relationship at the same time as we manage process.
Great, thanks, Andrew. Another question from Marielle. When you submit a proposal, clients usually tend to go silent. So what are the best practices to follow up with them and take power on being chosen?
I always ask what the procurement process is. And I think it's very important that you have some transparency around how procurement works in a particular organization. So it's hard to ask who the decision maker is. That can be seen as a rude question sometimes, and one that I would certainly encourage you to avoid. But if you could ask for what the process is, a bit like when you go for a job interview, what's the next step you can ask, which is quite a simple question. And knowing what that process is can often give you some insights about how you might influence the process, or where you can follow up appropriately.
Thanks very much. So a question from Rufus now. The challenge in most failed negotiations is dealing in good faith and the intention of parties, e.g. ego. How do we manage that?
Yeah, look, ego is really important, and I think it's important to kind of play to your strengths. So for example, if the person is more senior than you or has a lot of buying power, try to really identify and think about, well, what are your sources of value? You might be, for example, a couple of steps down the rung in a hierarchy from the person, but you're an expert in a particular area that that person needs. So you're setting up what we call interdependencies, where they need you and you need them. So think about what do I bring to the table? Okay, I might not be as experienced as this person. I might not be as senior as them, or have as good a reputation in the market or whatever it is. But what do I bring to the table? Particularly if you're younger or you're more experienced, think about where your source of expertise, what value do you bring to the table? And remind yourself of how important that is to the overall outcome. Really important, I think, in remembering that you're valuable too. You wouldn't be in the discussion if you weren't.
Great tips. Thank you, Andrew. We've only got time for just one or two more questions. The question that we've got from Zarina, which is, how do you negotiate for a refund of a purchase when the other party is the bigger player in the negotiation?
Yeah, gosh. Look, it's really important, I think, that you in that situation like that, if you're getting a lot of pushback, that you know your rights. And in whether it's in consumer rights or whether it's a clause in a contract, don't go into a negotiation not knowing what your rights are, and often just embedding an important phrase into a message that you deliver shows people or signals to people that you know your rights. And I think that's very important. I remember having a conversation recently with a car company. I was trying to get quite an expensive repair done on my car. And I mentioned to the person I was negotiating with, I said, look, is this a conversation where I need to escalate it to, and then I said the chief customer officer for Australia's name. I said, I really don't want to have to send an email to chief customer officer, which perhaps indicated to them that maybe I know this person. So there was a degree of implied risk in the way that I was speaking to them, that if they didn't get back to me, there was always a risk that I would send an email to the chief customer officer for Australia. So you could call it a threat. I prefer not to use that word, but it was an implied threat. I didn't send the email, but I said that I could and I would. And so just knowing the phrase, maybe knowing the right person, can maybe make the person a little bit more responsive.
And just our last question that we've got time for, is there any tips on negotiating with stubborn individuals?
With stubborn individuals, I think I know a few of those. Yeah, look, persistence. I'm not sure the person's name there, but persistence is really important, and also probably thinking a little bit about the timing. Sometimes people who are stubborn are a little bit more amenable at particular times of the day or times of the year, where you might find them in a more amenable mood. So, you've got to also think about the person as well as just thinking about the substance of the argument. So, really try to find out as much about the person as you can, and also, perhaps think about what their hot buttons are or what's in it for them.
Yeah, that was a great question from Alan. Thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks, Alan.
That's all we've got time for questions for today. Andrew, can you tell us where we can find more information about the course that this taster webinar is taken from for negotiation and conflict resolution? Is there more information you can share with us on that?
Thanks, Suzanne. Yeah, folks, I'm really great that you came along today. I hope today's given you a little bit of an idea for what comes next. And as Marika kindly introduced at the beginning, we are partnering with ANZCHAM early in the new year to deliver a virtual learning experience with myself as the facilitator. We're calling it Advancing Your Negotiation Skills. We're not pitching it at the absolute beginner level. We expect that the people who come along will have a moderate degree of experience. So it's on the 3rd, 10th and 17th of February, the live events. And there'll be similar times of the day to what we're working at the moment. There'll be 3 2-hour webinars, and there'll also be some online material where you can do some self-directed learning and some assessment as part of the course. you'll receive a digital badge from Macquarie University that you can put on your LinkedIn page or your CV. So that'll be an important evidence and testament to your learning. And it's 14,000 pesos for the entire 3 sessions, and there is an early bird discount. So we're hoping that there might be some unspent training budget that with your fantastic negotiation skills from today, we can negotiate that they can be allocated towards this learning investment for early next year, and that applies for until the end of this calendar year, and there's a 1,500 peso discount on the early bird rate. And there's further information on the ANZCHAM website and also through the email that's on the screen there. So I really hope I can see some of you in that seminar series next year. And with that, I'll pass back to Marika and say thanks very much again for coming along, and have a Merry Christmas, everybody. I hope everybody stays safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. I thought the 30-minute that everyone has invested on this morning was really worth it. Your presentation was really insightful, and I myself learned a lot of tips today, so thank you very much. At this point, I just really want to invite everyone to the coming events of ANZCHAM. Tomorrow, we have 2 events happening. We have a coaching session, which is about creating conversation breakthroughs. This will be facilitated by People Ignite, one of our most requested training partners, and it's going to be by their chief igniter, JV Wong. So if you haven't registered, please do so. You'll see the links on our website and also our LinkedIn page. And then on the next one will be on Thursday. Also tomorrow, but it's 11 a.m. Sorry, 25th is tomorrow. Yes, it's a business above usual. It's our Women in Business Luncheon Forum. We are sending actual lunch kits to your homes. If you come and join us, we have the new country manager for ANZ, Rufus, who's going to talk about his leadership and how he promotes diversity in his organization. And also we have the president and CEO of GCash, Martha Sazon, joining us for that event as well. So please register and enjoy the inspiring talks from these leaders. And then on Friday, we have FinTech trends overseas and how that affects and how that impacts the Philippines. So that's on Friday. This is in partnership with CPA Australia. So I hope you come and join us for that event as well. On the 10th of December, we have our ANZCHAM members Christmas party. We don't have a flyer for that yet, but I do hope you save that date. We are offering and sending you wine and cheese kits from our partner for that event. So I hope you save the date and join us for a little bit of fun to end the year. And of course, I just want to let you know that this flyer about advancing your negotiation skills together with the Macquarie Business School will be up on our website and on Eventbank for you to register. And Andrew has gone through the details already. So please take advantage of the early bird rate and register as soon as you can. All right, that's it, Suzanne. Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you've taken to be part of this webinar. Thank you very much to our guest, Marika Gonzalez, the Executive Director from Australia and New Zealand Chamber of Commerce, and also our presenter for today, Dr. Andrew Hees, the Director of International Engagement at Macquarie Business School. We thank you very much for your time. This webinar is recorded and will be available to you if you'd like to watch it again. So we'll be sending that to you and it will be available on the ANZCHAM website also. Thank you very much. Have a great day.